Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of Towards Health and H1 podcast. We're excited today to have Jocelyn Levin, Senior Customer Success Manager for H1. And today we're talking about, is the customer always right? Thoughts on support and success for pharma and life sciences companies. Jocelyn, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I've been at H1 for 2.5 years. I'm based in New York City. And prior to H1, I actually come by way of making a career change. So spent primarily my entire career in finance and accounting, started in public accounting, transitioned to private. And then right prior to H1, I worked internally at Ernst & Young for their financial consulting practice, doing internal staffing. Come right before the pandemic hit, I decided to make a big career change, really got excited and interested in the customer success and CS world. So extra excited to talk about that with you today. But yeah, April 2020, I started here at H1 in the customer success team, and we have since grown. Like you mentioned, I'm a senior customer success manager, and I head up our HCP Universe product offering.
That's awesome. The world has changed a lot since COVID. So a lot of people took a completely different career turn, but I know customer success is a big part of what we do. So how do you define customer success?
Yeah, great question. So at a high level, I really like to explain our role as really being the voice of the customer, right? So we're bridging that gap between our customers and then our internal data product engineering team. So our goal is not only product adoption and user engagement, but it's really making sure that we're developing products and platforms that are agile. And like you mentioned, the past few years have quite changed our whole, not only our industry, all industries, but for us to be able to provide services to our clients that are, like I said, agile are super important. And without having that CSM kind of voice of the customer role, it's really hard to grow with the ever-changing industry and market. So I like to say, like I mentioned, voice of the customer, just in summary. We also are that true kind of partner to our clients versus just being that vendor, right?
Yeah, you're sort of the advocate for the customer between H1 and what they're doing. And a lot of our customers have very complex organizations. So how does this translate or differ in B2B health tech and health startup?
Yeah, great question. So I think how it differs across all of these industries and organizations is that there's so much data, right? There's so many different ways to surface it. So we as a CS team, we have to kind of be pretty custom to each client, but remaining consistent. So our clients range from med device companies to big pharma to, I mean, we're going down the route of healthcare professionals as end users. We have ClinOps organizations of pharma using our platforms. And so while their use cases might all be different, from a CS perspective, our support needs to remain consistent. And we need to kind of become that SME in that world to really be that strategic partner. So it's helping our clients build a workflow that's going to make their day-to-day more efficient. So while it's different across all of our end users and the types of clients that we have, from a CSM perspective or just an overall customer success and experience perspective, that's really kind of the glue that needs to keep consistent. And also just to kind of further along that lines, I've been listening to some CS podcasts, and our role is changing. It's relatively new. It's not, it hasn't been around forever. So we are kind of growing with the profession, and we're not filling a mold, we're creating that mold. So while, even outside of health tech, even if we're talking about finance companies using a SaaS platform, the CS role is evolving and will continue to evolve as we get smarter in this digital and technical world.
That's a great point. So what do you consider the difference between customer success, customer experience, and customer support? Are those very similar, or do they have different defined roles for you?
Yeah. So while support and success, for example, might have different defined day-to-day roles, I like to think of it as kind of like support is the building block of success and experience. So, I mean, if we're going to quickly put a definition to support versus success/experience. Support is more reactive, right? Your support desk, your technical support desk, whereas the success and experience team is more proactive, right? But you really can't have a holistic support package for your clients without having both of those aspects. And in my mind, support and success kind of just inform the overall customer experience and helps really create a customer base that's more sophisticated, right? I also kind of just like to think of it as a consumer, right? As human consumers, we want to have someone to go to when we need help, right? So that's kind of that support aspect. But it's also so nice as a consumer. Like, that would be awesome if all of my apps had someone reaching out to me saying like, hey, I see that you're interested in XYZ. How can I help tailor, your search in that platform, right? Like thinking of like fitness apps or something like that. So um, anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole there, but I really do see it more evolving when it comes to like a client vendor relationship, as where we have success and experience. It really takes us out of being in that true just vendor role and into being a real partner to our clients, because they're not coming to us just for, technical support anymore, right? We're coming to them with strategic insights from all of the data that they're leveraging.
You're like the Alexa. You're like the built-in Alexa of H1, anticipating their needs. I like it. I like it.
That's a fun analogy.
So, having worked with our different clients, what's one of the biggest challenges that you see them face? Like you said, there's so much data in healthcare. So, if they're trying to surface insights, what are some of the biggest challenges you see that they face that sometimes we help solve?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges just in general is like you mentioned, so much data. But I also think that clients or users, like, or just clients in this space, they want that data surfaced in a very specific way to inform their overall business strategy. So they want it to work in a like very specific to their needs. And there are going to be different groups within an organization that are going to want to leverage that data in different ways. And there are just so many different tools and platforms out there. So I think that's a big challenge right now. There could be large organizations using different tools, right? And I think working in silos kind of happens in big pharma, but where CS comes into play, or where our platform comes into play too specifically, is we can help piece that together. So while it's not going to do well, I don't want to say while it's not going to do exactly what you want it to do, but like I said, as a consumer, you want something to work exactly how you want it to work individually. But when we're thinking larger organizations, as a challenge, we can't all have the same exact platform work in the same exact way that we want it to with all of this data. So where CS comes into play is with all of the data that's out there, we really kind of help drive insights out of it for you, but then also are your thought partner there. There's no such thing as a perfect SaaS platform in any industry, right? But where CS is super important is that you at least have that partnership to get you exactly what you need, and help really inform those business decisions. Even working in this challenging environment of so much data, moving from 2.5 years of, I mean, if we think of just the MSL role, they were walking into doctors' offices every single day, and 2.5 years, they essentially stopped doing that, right? And now there's so much more data. There's this whole digital world, and that's challenging for them. But having a partner within your vendor, right, to help kind of navigate the changes in the industry is super important. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges. Like I mentioned, just in summary, like so much data, so many ways to surface it, but that's really where CS, as an org shines.
Yeah, it's those personalized insights like you were talking about. And you're a big customer advocate because you're next to the customer. So you are next to those stories that are kind of seeing how we're helping the longer term. So how do you and why do you think those stories are important to share?
Yeah, great question. I think that, since we are, like I said, voice of the customer, like you mentioned, we're so close to the customer. Without sharing those stories, we can't learn and grow, right? While we're taking all feedback of what's working with the clients, we're also taking feedback of what isn't working. And without that transparency and sharing within our organization, but even just across for like the whole industry, we can't learn as an industry. I guess industry, I'm using industry a little too much, but like I just like to say, like, without being able to share those best practices across the board, it's hard for us to learn and grow. But then also within a client, right? We are that voice of the customer. We're also helping with user adoption and engagement. And if my colleague is using a tool and it's working really well, but I'm not even using a tool and just kind of doing what I've always done for the past 15 years in my role, I'm not really learning, right? So being able to share that across within your organization and also outside is super important to just help grow in an ever-changing, rapidly growing environment.
Yeah, you mentioned we did a survey with MSLS recently, and they said that their whole world has changed in the past 2 years. Some of them found that their KOL engagement strategies were more challenging. Some of them found that they were more accessible, and others found the opposite. So, really, you guys evolving with them is so important to understand kind of the changes they've been affected by, but also so how you can be an effective partner. So, that being said, why do you think if you're engaging with multiple stakeholders across these sort of complex matrix organizations, why is that collaboration an important part of your bigger strategy?
Yeah, a great point. So having that collaboration is super important to our larger strategy because, in my mind, from an integrity standpoint, right, it's very obvious to our clients if we're not strategically aligned internally. But then also, if I'm talking to one stakeholder in one therapeutic area, right, and but also engaging with a different stakeholder in another TA, I think not having that transparency into like big picture zoom out, it's harder for me to be strategic. It's harder for me to kind of think bigger picture. I like to say the CS is kind of like and tell this to my direct reports, we're like the PM essentially of the client, right? We might not be delivering everything to our clients or responsible for every single project. We have a pulse on this. And then when we go into those larger conversations with key stakeholders across the entire organization, having that insight and knowledge really kind of helps build that integrity there, right? I think that's also why clients value a strategic partner like a CSM, because they know that if they're talking to me about one thing, I have insight into bigger picture, everything that's going on. And I can help, provide insights based on other conversations and have teams learn, based on how everyone else is kind of running their engagement with us.
Yeah, you're like the glue that holds it all together, because I know a lot of times in pharma, especially, different TAs or therapeutic areas can have different priorities across the organization. So really kind of having that common thread of the CSM, I'm sure, is critical.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens often, especially if we're meeting on a recurring basis with like kind of like the overarching field medical excellence team, for example, and work it. And when we kind of go through all the projects that we're working on with each TA, it's really it's kind of fulfilling when they're like, oh wait, that sounds like something that like this team would really
Yeah.
enjoy, right? And then it's like it's always like I get so excited about that because I'm like, yeah, it was super successful. Like it sounds like you guys can benefit from it too, based on where you are in your product life cycle, and then it helps me learn too, and then help share across the org. So that's kind of one of the things that gets me super excited in my conversations with my clients.
That's awesome. It's like success amplified. Well, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And again, thanks for listening. You're listening to Towards Health, an H1 podcast. Thanks, Jocelyn.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.